So I'm Father Peter Mactutis, and no, this is not one of my homilies. I've been putting some of my homilies on YouTube. This is a little different. This is my day off, and so I have behind me, although you can't really see it right now because of course the clouds are coming in right as I start recording, but I have Mount Baker. And so Mount Baker is in the North Cascades, and that is Mount Baker right there. And so I'm standing at Park Butte Fire Lookout. It was about a 3.5 mile hike. It was a good hike. And it's a beautiful day. Beautiful day. It'll clear up in a second, I hope. But anyways, you at least get to see the clouds. And so coming up here, there's a lot of symbols about life. As I was driving up, it was raining. And I'm thinking, oh man, it's going to be horrible up here. It's just going to be terrible, terrible weather. And as I parked my car, I was like, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's going to clear up a little bit. And so I just kept going. And I had lunch and I kept coming up. And after about 2 hours of hiking up here, got up here and it was just gorgeous, just beautiful. Except now, of course, the clouds moved in. But it is beautiful. You can see the Cascades out over there. There's some valleys out here. It's beautiful. And so it's kind of like life. So St. Ignatius of Antioch, St. Ignatius of Loyola in his spiritual exercises, he talks about that when you're in desolation in life, and so life's not going so well, and in your spiritual life you're struggling, or you feel like God's really far away, and you might even feel like he doesn't even care, and life's just not maybe very easy at that moment. And he would say, you have to persevere. You can't stop. You can't turn around. You have to persevere. Don't start changing things. Don't start making big decisions in your life. In moments of desolation, you persevere. You keep at it. And so that's kind of what I did. I just kept at it and said, well, today's my day off. I can't really come up tomorrow. So I'll just hope for the best, and came up here and actually was really blessed. Turned out to be a beautiful, beautiful day. So coming up here in the parking lot where you park to begin the hike, there's some notification that this is kind of the base parking lot for people who are going to summit the mountain. Come on, clouds. All right, anyways, people who are going to summit the mountain. And so these are people who are taking their hiking pretty seriously. Me, I'm an amateur. I don't really get up in the snow. But they have all their gear. They come really prepared because where they're going, it's potentially dangerous, right? I mean, they're going to go right up to the top of the mountain where it's full of snow, and they have to know what they're doing. They have to have the right equipment. If you were to talk to them and ask them, so why are you doing this? Why are you summiting this mountain when it is somewhat dangerous? And you know, when you talk to people about it, their language that they use actually becomes somewhat spiritual, somewhat mystical. They start talking about, you know, for them it's pursuing something more. It's getting up into, you know, like the heavens. It's really finding something more up there that they don't have in their daily routine down in the city. And that's why they do it. And you know, so I've been thinking a little bit about that, and I often wonder though, if they're seeking something that's not actually up there, but that's a little bit nearer to them, they just don't realize it. What do you think I'm talking about? Well, you know what I'm talking about. So I could rename this mountain. Instead of Mount Baker, you could rename it and say, what then? Mount what then? So you summited the mountain. What then? Now what? What are you seeking? What are you really searching for? And so when somebody summits the mountain, you say, well, what then? Well, they got to come back down because you really can't spend that much time up there. And so they come back down the mountain. What then? Well, they start planning to hike up a taller mountain, right? Maybe Mount Rainier or somewhere like that. And they start preparing and they start doing everything they need to do, and they look for a greater challenge. But what are they really looking for? What then? Now, eventually, in our culture, people seem to be seeking thrills and seeking adventure, and because their lives maybe seem routine or boring or whatever, but they're seeking. They're really seeking. Now, I know who they're seeking. They're seeking God, but they don't know that. And so maybe they go after the ultimate, the thing that will fulfill their life and give them everything they could ever dream of, and the glory that comes with it, and perhaps even the bragging rights. They think of Mount Everest, right? So Mount Everest, thousands of dollars to get to Mount Everest, right? It's very expensive, and you have to have tons of gear, and you have to have people who know what they're doing, and it takes months and months of preparation, and it takes all these people, the Sherpas and all the people to get you up there, right? And you do all that, and your hope is that you can be one of the few people to summit the mountain, to summit Mount Everest, the highest mountain. So you could be up there for a couple minutes. Now, the thing with Mount Everest is that a few people get to summit it, right? They're successful, take some nice pictures. But you know where most people die on Mount Everest? It's on the way down. On the way down, most people die on Mount Everest. And so on the way down, that's where I think I would rename Mount Everest. I would rename it Mount Was It Worth It? Was it worth it? You took all this effort to get up to the mountain. Did it give you what you were seeking? And was it really worth it just to die on the way down? Now, not everybody dies on the way down, but some people do. So you see, was it worth it? Now, they may say, well, yeah, because, I've longed for this my whole life. But ask their widow, ask their kids who are left behind, who don't have dad or don't have mom. You ask them, was it worth it? And they may say something like, well, he was pursuing his dream. This is what he's always wanted. I say, but wouldn't you rather have them here with you? I mean, was it really worth it? I don't think it was. So what is it they were really seeking? So let's go to our faith. Let's see if our faith has some good answers, okay? Because there's another name for Mount Everest I would use. It's a little more critical. I would call it mountain narcissism. And we are totally getting socked in here. Mountain narcissism. That's kind of like what clouds do. That's kind of like what narcissism is. It's like these clouds that come in because we think that we're pursuing life and life is going to be great, but really all we're doing is we're just being closed in on ourselves, and we can't see anybody else around us, and we become completely self-centered. And so when they're up on that mountain on Mount Everest, it's all about them, and they're really not caring about anybody else. That's not the path to heaven, that's the path to hell. So that's the ultimate trick of Satan. He gets you to think you're pursuing heaven, but really, all you're doing is being a narcissist and pursuing hell. So, let's find heaven. Let's go in the Old Testament. So you remember Moses. What was the mountain that Moses was known for going up? Well, it was Mount Sinai. You know that, right? But there's another name for Mount Sinai. And it's a different type of mountain in a sense, Mount Horeb. So Mount Horeb is kind of a unique mountain because it's a mountain that moves. This mountain travels. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And so when the Israelites were journeying, the mountain followed them. And it followed Moses. And I think there's an analogy of that the mountain is like God. And so I think people, in the end, they're seeking God, right? And so the mountain is like God, but God is pursuing his people. And that makes sense when you think about the Israelites in the desert. He was trying to purify their hearts because they had become somewhat narcissistic. They had forgotten God. And so this mountain, Mount Horeb, is following them. Now, let's think of Moses, though, a little bit before that. So there was the time after he had fled the Egyptians and the Israelites, and he was living a very peaceful life. He was happy. He was married. He had 2 kids. He was a shepherd in the hills. And then he sees something in the mountains. He sees a fire. He sees this fire burning up into the mountain. And there's this bush. And so he goes and he pursues it. He searches for it. He finds it. That's why I think it's great we're at a fire lookout. Just like life, right? We want to be at a fire lookout. We want to be looking for that fire. And so when Moses finds that fire on the mountain, and he finds that burning bush, what he finds is God. God who really came to him and was pursuing him. And they met, they came together. And so you have this beautiful moment. It's like adoration when Moses takes his shoes off because he's on holy ground, and he comes down before this burning bush, the presence of God. And you know, for us as Christians, we see the Holy Spirit in that totally. It's like the first Pentecost, the fire coming down to Moses. And so in this moment, you have God forging this very intimate bond, this intimacy between him and Moses. But when Moses left, it wasn't just, okay, you know, I summited the mountain. There is a mountain back there, all right? You just have to take my word for it right now. So he wasn't just about summiting the mountain and then going back and being a shepherd. God was giving him a mission, right? And so he gives Moses a mission, and he sends him back where the last place he wants to go. He sends him back to the Egyptians and back to the Israelites because he needs him. He needs him to bring this message back to the Israelites that they are to be free. They are to be free to seek heaven. They are to be free. And so he continues on his mission. Now, Mount Horeb was not the only mount. Let me rephrase that. Moses was not the only one who found Mount Horeb. So you remember Elijah, and so Elijah has this moment where he's the only true prophet left. And there's all these false prophets. And so he takes him up a mountain near Mount Carmel. And he puts him to the test, and he says, choose God or choose the world, but you have to choose. And so they don't choose right. And so Elijah takes out his retribution on them. And then he flees. And he knows everybody wants to kill him. And there's nobody on his side, and he's all alone. And it's almost like this desolation. And so in this desolation, he flees. And where does he go? He goes to Mount Horeb. And he goes to God and he says, God, just take me. Just kill me. There's no point in me being here. I'm all alone. There's nobody left to follow you. And so God forges this intimacy with him at Mount Horeb. And then gives him a mission. That he must persevere. He must continue. He must continue. Now you might be thinking, well, I'm not Moses, I'm not Elijah. But you are a prophet if you've been baptized. And to your own family, to your friends. And if you really open your heart up to God, you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how many people your life will impact. Now, this was not the only time that you have Moses or Elijah up on a mountain with a really special event. So if in the New Testament, you remember when Jesus went up the mountain, Mount Tabor, and he brought Peter, James, and John with him. And who appears on this mountaintop to have this magnificent vision of Jesus? That's right, Moses and Elijah. And so they have this beautiful moment. And it's kind of a reckoning moment too. For Peter, James, and John, it's almost like this last peaceful moment before Jesus takes them back to Jerusalem for the last time. And he's going to take them up another mountain there called Golgotha, Calvary, right? And from that mountain, the world will never be the same. He was up there with Peter, James, and John, and they have this incredible moment. Peter wants to build these tents because it's like the burning bush. It's like Pentecost. He doesn't want it to end. But Jesus gives them a mission, and it's the same mission we have. And it's not up here. We can come up here on our day off. We got to go back and pursue our mission. And so this is not why we exist. Well, you can't see anything. This is not why we exist, though. He's up here, right? Not on this mountain. He's on the mountain in our churches, on the altars, right? In the tabernacles. He's in our hearts. He's working in our lives. That's where he's at. So if you ever find yourself kind of dreaming or seeking other things or looking for purpose in life, turn back to the God who created you, the God who loves you, and the God who desires to bring you closer, to give you a mission. All right, God bless.